My name is Lena. I am a staff attorney at Highest Pennsylvania, and I work on the domestic violence team. So Highest Pennsylvania is a legal services organization, which means that we represent people either for free or at a very low cost. Originally, Highest Pennsylvania started by representing Jewish refugees who came here after the Holocaust. But we did spread out, and now we represent people from all over the world. We have many, many different teams at Highest Pennsylvania. These are the legal teams that we have. So we have a team that works for asylee outreach, for citizenship and family unification, children and youth, survivors of crime, survivors of torture, survivors of domestic violence, which is what my team works on. And we also do have deportation defense. We also have a social services side. And this side works with refugee resettlement, education, immigrant wellness, employment, and health. So we're gonna do just a little crash course, and this is the only slide that I have on it, because what we're gonna talk about is just the different places that you can be, the different statuses that you can have, okay? So you can start as a non-immigrant. This is a person who has come here and does not have the intention to stay, or at least the government does not know that they have the intention to stay in the United States. So that could be someone with a student visa, a visitor visa, someone who has temporary status here. And that also includes undocumented people, okay? So you could move to the immigrant category, which are people that have their green cards, okay? So they come here with the intention of staying in the United States and making a life here for a longer period of time. And then after you have your green card for a certain amount of time, then you can apply to become a citizen. The protections that you have grow as you get further on this scale. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the specific pathways. And I'm going to give you an overview of like each one. But remember, the point is not for you to memorize all of these. It's just to give you a background so that you can spot issues. So my team mostly works with people who are either doing self-petitions under the Violence Against Women Act. You can also do a removal of conditions on a green card, a U visa, which is for immigrant survivors of crime, and then a T visa is for survivors of trafficking. So we're going to start off with the Violence Against Women Act. This is a special visa for immigrants who have been abused by their spouse, who is a United States citizen or who has a green card. Or it can also be for other family members. And we'll talk a little bit about the specifics in just a second. Basically, the reason that this came about was that normally in a normal relationship where there's no domestic violence, if there is an immigrant spouse, the United States citizen spouse can do a petition for them, can say, this is my wife, this is my husband, and I want them to be able to have status too so they can stay with us. But in a domestic violence situation, oftentimes this is a way that an abuser abuses someone and has power and control over them by saying, I'm not going to do the petition for you because I want to be able to say, well, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to get you deported. If you don't do what I want, then you're not going to have any status here. So that is something that we see, and that's why Congress made this this form of relief so that immigrants are not going to be stuck in an abusive situation just because they don't have any immigration status. The immigrant victim can petition for the green card themselves, which means that the abuser doesn't have to know. And it also means that they don't have to separate from their abuser. I have some clients that are still living with their abuser and are able to make the petition, and that's their choice about what's safe for them, okay? Who qualifies? So there's lots of different family options. There's an abused spouse of a United States citizen or a legal permanent resident, someone who has their green card. There's the abused child of a United States citizen or a legal permanent resident. There's also the non-abused spouse of a United States citizen or a legal permanent resident whose child was abused. So if I don't have status, I marry my husband who is a United States citizen, and I have a child who is abused by my husband, I can potentially get immigration status because my child was abused by a United States citizen parent, okay? There also is an option for an abused parent. So we often see situations of elder abuse, where there might be a parent who's being abused by a United States citizen or a legal permanent resident, and they can also have a case. There also is an option for derivatives. So in that situation, if I am an immigrant who doesn't have status, and I have my United States citizen spouse, but I have children, for example, that are back in my home country who are under 21 years old, I can include them in my application. They can be included as derivatives. Or I have children that are here that don't have status either, that came with me. They can also be included, okay? What are the benefits of a VAWA self-petition? So the benefits are that you can get deferred action while your petition is still pending, okay? So unfortunately, as I was speaking with some people earlier, immigration cases take a very long time. VAWA cases, from what I've seen recently, it normally takes at least 2 years, could be 3 years, to get to the final status where they're actually going to be approved. But while you're waiting, they will do a determination about whether they're going to give you employment authorization, a work permit, and also whether they're going to give you deferred action, which is protection from deportation, okay? And depending on your country, you may be able to submit the application for your green card at the same time that you do your VAWA application. Some countries you have to wait, but some countries you're able to do it right away, okay? What do you have to prove to get a VAWA self-petition? So first, you have to have documents to show that you have a legal relationship with a United States citizen or the green card holder. So if you're married, you need to have a marriage certificate. If you are the child, you need to have a birth certificate or something else that shows that you are related. If you're the parent, same thing. If you have a birth certificate to show that your child is your child, then you can use that. In spousal cases, you have to show good faith marriage, which means that you have to show that you didn't get married just to get immigration status. You got married for some other reason. You also have to be able to show that you lived with the abuser at some point. It doesn't matter how long you lived with the abuser. It could just be for, a day. It doesn't matter how long. You just have to have lived with them at some point. You also have to be able to show battery or extreme cruelty. So there are options for physical abuse and also for mental abuse or financial abuse. Physical abuse cases are often easier because there's more evidence. So for example, there could be a police report, there could be medical bills, there could be photos of injuries, but it's not necessary. So you can do a case without it. It's a little harder. And then you also have to show good moral character. So you have to show that you're a good person who deserves to stay here in the United States. And that's where I believe a lot of you could come into play. If you have a relationship with your constituents and you know that they're a good person, you can write them a letter of support and say, I know Lena, she's been in my congregation for 10 years. She's always volunteers, all those kinds of things. You can write like a statement to help support them. Then there's also the VAWA battered spouse waiver. So this is a little bit different. It's still under VAWA, but it is for people whose spouse actually did start the petition process. So it could be, normally what happens is your husband or wife would do the petition for you. And if your marriage was under 2 years at the time that the petition was filed, immigration will give you a 2-year green card. It's called a conditional green card. And basically that's because they are like, well, you've only been married for 2 years. Is this a real marriage? We want to be able to check in later to see if it's actually real. And normally what happens is that people will go to a joint interview after the 2 years. And if the marriage is still fine, they'll answer all the questions. They'll say, yes, this is still my spouse. We're still in love. And then they'll be able to prove that the relationship is still there. However, in an abuse case, you might not be able to do that. Maybe your abuser wouldn't go with you to the interview. And there is an option to get a waiver of that and remove the conditions and get a 10-year green card by showing this almost the same things as for the VAWA petition. Okay, so that's VAWA, and that's specifically for people who have a marriage with a US citizen or a legal permanent resident. But what happens if you're not married, or if you're married to someone who's also undocumented? You still have options. And one of the big options is the U visa, which is a visa that was created for victims of crime. And basically what Congress thought was there's a lot of people who are undocumented, who are victims of crime, who don't report because they're afraid that they're going to be deported. And so there's a lot of perpetrators of crime that get away with crime and aren't held accountable because they're never reported to the police, there's never an investigation, all those kinds of things. So Congress created this status that allows people a pathway to get immigration status, okay, if they cooperate with law enforcement. The benefits are that you can get employment authorization, you can get a 4-year non-immigrant status once the petition is approved, and then eventually you can get your green card, you can get your citizenship. The downside to the U visa is that it takes a very, very, very long time. What we're seeing now is just to get the initial work permit, it takes 4 to 5 years. To get the actual non-immigrant status, it takes more than 10 years. But it is a pathway for people who might not have any other options. And the work authorization is a big part of why people do end up filing the petitions. You can also file for some of your family members as well as derivatives. So that's another big option. So what do you have to prove? You have to prove that you are a victim of a qualifying criminal activity. For my team, what we look at it's domestic violence. So it can be things like stalking, threatening, harassment, physical violence, all those kinds of things we can include as a qualifying criminal activity. They must have information about the crime, and they must have been helpful, are being helpful, or are willing to be helpful in the detection, investigation, or prosecution of a crime. What does this mean? It means that you don't have to actually have a trial. There doesn't have to actually be someone who's convicted of the crime against you. You can report to the police and tell them that you're willing to testify, you're willing to do this, you're willing to press charges. If the police decide, we don't really want to press charges, that doesn't matter. You can still be eligible. Depending on the county that you're in, it can be harder to get the certification, which is required. In Philadelphia, it is easier to get the certification. The crime must have occurred in the United States, and you must have suffered substantial physical or mental abuse as a result of the crime. I mean, we can use therapist records, we can use a psychological evaluation in order to prove those, but the statement of the person is often the most important part, where they explain everything that happened and the impact that it had on them. There's several different types of victims. There's a direct victim, so if the crime actually occurred against you. There's also someone who's a bystander who suffers an unusually direct injury. And there's also an indirect victim, which can include family members of the direct victim if they died. So for example, if your child was murdered, you could potentially get a U visa based on the impact of that. So what does it mean to be helpful? It means that you have to cooperate with any reasonable request. This can be with normally the police, but it can also be with the district attorney if there's actually a case filed. It can be with CYS, the Department of Children and Youth Services, DHS, if there's a Department of Human Services investigation that's opened. So generally, if there's a crime that happened and they've been helpful to some organization or agency, you can refer them to us and we'll take a look at it. And there's an ongoing responsibility to cooperate, okay? There's a T visa, which is for victims of trafficking. So you have to be physically present in the United States because of the trafficking. And you have to have helped with any reasonable request. A T visa has a much smaller wait list. That's the main benefit of a T visa. While the U visa can take 10 years, the T visa takes maybe 2 or 3 years. There is no backlog, and you're also eligible for refugee benefits while you're waiting. So you can get some public benefits that U visa applicants are not eligible for. There's also a VAWA cancellation of removal for people who are in deportation proceedings right now. There's asylum based on domestic violence that happened outside of the United States. And there's also special immigrant juvenile status, which is for children who have been abused, neglected, or abandoned by at least one parent. Now I want to talk a little bit about what you can do to support survivors, and I'd love for you guys to think about it more. These are just some of my quick thoughts, but there's definitely more that you can do. So the first step is to talk to them. When people come and they disclose abuse to you, you should believe them, and you should encourage them to talk to you about whatever it is. A lot of times it's very, very scary to take that first step and actually talk to someone. And so if they come to you and they trust you enough to talk to you about it, you really want to make sure that you don't have the, initial reaction to be like, I don't know, like I know the other person, like, and they seem like a good guy or they seem like a good woman. Like, no, that is not what we want to do. We want to be supportive, and we want to make sure that they feel comfortable, continuing to work with you if they need support. You can also help them on their timeline. Like I said before, there are some people that don't separate from their abuser, and that's their choice. A survivor knows best about what the dangers are for them if they were to separate. I have a lot of clients that the abuser has threatened to kill their family back home if they leave. So they don't feel safe to go, especially since the police here won't be able to do anything to protect their family back home. So it's really important for us to, support them where they're at, help them with what they can, and don't try to push them to do something if they feel like it's not safe. You can refer your survivors to HIAS Pennsylvania. I'm going to have my information on the screen and in your slide deck. So you can just send me an email with the information. And then you can also write letters of support. So if people have come and disclosed to you, you can be really a good way of building up evidence for them. And along with evidence collection, you can help them with that too throughout the process. So one of the things this is just one tip, I normally tell survivors to have a Google Drive or something like that where they'll put evidence in, even if they're not ready to leave. Maybe they can put photos of injuries or things like that into the Google Drive, because what I've seen is that a lot of abusers will break your phone or they'll go through it in order to delete things so that you don't have evidence of what happened. But if you have it online in a secure spot, then you can have it for the time when you are ready to leave. Okay, so how to refer a case. Here's my contact information and the information that you should include in your referral so that I know whether it's safe to leave a voicemail. It's very important because if they're still with their abuser, I don't want to leave a voicemail that could potentially get them into trouble. And yeah, this is the end of the presentation. We'll open it up to